Welcome. This is my guide to the new Eclipse. Information provided here is still early, and new strategies will develop over time, but I want to share my thoughts, methods, and ideas towards getting the most out of Eclipse. To start, let's talk about rewards. Eclipse rewards are broken up into two sets: the rewards for the wave clearing by all teams, and the MVP bonus. Because of the MVP bonus, it's still important to focus most of your efforts on a power team who gets further in Eclipse than your other teams. By meeting certain wave clears, you'll increase your starting wave, which in turn raises your basic rewards for lower teams, and effectively decreases the amount of anti-healing stacks from each wave. Your secondary teams will then want to focus on meeting every 10 wave clears to obtain an extra gold ether. In this case, my power team is Team 1, who clears past wave 40. My other teams are a mix of clearing waves 30, 20, and some only make it to 10. So for strengthening teams, I want to make my power team strong enough to eventually clear wave 50, and my lower teams to strengthen up to eventually clear the next 10th wave benchmark. Due to the lower difficulty and lower waves, sometimes small investments or changes in teams that can only beat wave 10 to be strong enough to clear wave 20 will be the quickest way to increase overall rewards. Let's talk about teams. Teams will want to be built with a knight, a priest, and a DPS in each team. The fourth slot is either going to be a damage support or an additional DPS. Let's start with some recommended knights. Defensive knights who can keep your allies safe while also improving team's damage is vital. When gearing knights, an equal focus on physical and magic stats is important, as you will have to tank enemies of both damage types throughout the run. Block, defense, and toughness are the most important lines. Glenweiss offers damage reduction and damage dealt increase from and to non-hero enemies at the start of each battle. She also offers team-wide attack and defense boosting. Philip is extremely tanky due to his unique weapon and UT4 applying attack down immediately on auto attack. His shred helps increase a physical team's damage. Jane also applies attack down to an area around her with her unique weapon and has access to constant shred with her UT3, and T5 Dark allows her to be healed more effectively throughout the run. She's more important in magic teams. Klaus offers shred, amp, physical defense, and attack boosting with his S3 and unique weapon. His S3 Dark provides a P-top buff that is extremely effective for making physical bosses much safer. Silica takes longer to apply her attack debuff, but she can boost the physical defense of your DPS using her T5 Dark, and her S3 provides sufficient shred for taking down bosses. Lohman's shield is a powerful safety net, and his load of CC and AMP allows him to score knockdowns on bosses and increase damage for physical teams. Neuraxis' S2 and S4 makes him and the rest of your team extremely tanky, and he also provides amps and additional CC. Taylie's S4 increases party defense for both physical and magic damage. She has access to attack down just from being near enemies, and can even reduce enemy penetration with UT4. The reduction of penetration acts as like a second layer of attack down, further decreasing enemy damage. And Demia's party-wide physical defense and P block increase from her S4, and access to further P damage reduction effects in her perks makes her effective for dealing with any physical enemies. Personally, I'm moving away from Ring of Spirit Morph in favor of more defensive artifacts and defensive gearing. With the right gear, I've been able to successfully tank bosses all the way up to wave 50 with relative ease. Artifacts like Guardian Crystal is extremely effective when you get to the 40 plus boss range, because all you're fighting is a single boss enemy. Master Chef's recipe book, if you have it, increases defense and healing rate and can be vital for going long distances in Eclipse. Other artifacts like Warm Turkey Dish, which increases HP in both blocks, is also a good alternative. Pumpkin Stuck Evil Spirit increases max HP and attack for the team. And Academic Achievement Award increases attack of the team and all defense of self, thus making you more tanky and also increasing damage and attack for your team. And attack can be vital for increasing shields, and we'll get into that when we talk about the supports. Next, let's talk about Priest. Just like Knights, Priests with a focus on defensive or healing rate increase are important. Also, heroes who provide a shield are extremely vital to your power team to survive and clear higher waves. When gearing Priests, I would say to focus on defensive stats. Enemies like Skavir can and will jump to your backline, and they're likely to get hit by several frontal AoE attacks used by bosses and the Liches. Since Priests have high innate magic defenses, focus more on increasing their physical defense. I highly recommend Rayhartna be in your power team. Her UT4 and S4 gives up to 60% increase to healing, which instead of the healing cutoff being 25 waves, it's now 40 waves. Her attack and defense increases from T5 Dark and her cooldown reduction from S3 makes her extremely powerful for any team. Since the update, the number of viable DPS has greatly improved. Progression in Eclipse will be heavily based on gear progression. There are still heroes that are obviously stronger in Eclipse, but do not feel like you have to use them strictly, as most DPS will now be able to clear up to wave 40 with the proper gearing and team composition. Single target DPS are best for bosses, while AoE DPS are better for the monster waves. Heroes with a mix of both single target and AoE generally perform better in Eclipse overall. For artifacts on your DPS, Lulu's necklace is still very strong, gives the 30-second buff at the start of every fight. Sometimes fights can take longer, so you may want to consider using hybrid animals instead, which increases damage and reduces damage taken from non-hero enemies. Additionally, the Pendulum artifact that provides attack for every wave and stacks 5 times is also an effective artifact to use. Maybe not necessarily on your main team, but on a secondary team. The fourth party slot should be used to fill in any weaknesses of your party. If your single target DPS is struggling with monster waves, consider using an AoE DPS to fill. If your DPS is at risk of being picked off by stray attacks, use a protection-based support or CC heavy hero to help control the enemies. If you just need more damage, use a support who provides amps and shred. The fourth party slot for your MVP team should use the strongest supports. Rayhartna is strongly recommended for MVP teams, as mentioned earlier. Here's an example of my teams from my last Eclipse run. First team is my MVP team, so I use my strongest Eclipse heroes there. After that, I try to balance the teams out, with the left side teams being the more invested teams, and the teams on the right being the lower investment. When I say low investment, I'm referring to heroes at or below 2-star unique weapons. Always prioritize your most strongest DPS with your most invested tanks and supports. Then try to fill the rest of the teams with whatever you have left. Because of the amount of heroes needed, I would strongly recommend focusing on picking up both Knights and Priests in the Heroes Inn until you can fill all 10 teams. If you want to succeed in Eclipse, you'll need to know about the bosses you fight. Skavir is an assassin type enemy who deals physical damage and can dive your backline heroes. You'll first see him on wave 15 and again on wave 35. Since you fight him on wave 15, he'll be your first roadblock to getting past wave 20 with low investment teams. Focus on having some form of physical defense buffing, and if you see him roar, you should dispel his attack buff, as this buff is extremely strong. If possible, I strongly recommend CCing him down to prevent him from jumping around too much. Cataplops is a horrible name to say and a horrible boss to fight. You'll face him on wave 20 and again on wave 40. He's the main gatekeeper for all your extra teams getting 2 gold ethers. so defeating him is important. With low investment teams, I recommend using either a tank who can dive behind him and redirect his attacks backwards, or use a DPS who can jump behind to safely DPS, as he has some devastating moves in front of him. He deals magic damage and will combo certain skills together, such as when he goes up in the air to shoot lasers at the ground in front of him. When he lands, he'll immediately follow up with a frontal laser that petrifies. You'll be safe behind him, or by using high defense artifacts or gear. Consider using an Orb of Contract if your DPS isn't high enough to burst him down, or if you're not able to get behind him. This is a demonstration of a low investment hero defeating Cataplops. At the start of the fight, immediately jump behind the boss if you have the ability to, and then continue to DPS from behind. Keep an eye on his attack pattern and watch for when he does the laser barrage. As you see, he goes in the air, fires lasers, hitting all backliners and the tank, and then fires a final laser. After that final laser, it is safe to jump back to the front again if you need to for additional DPS. But make sure that you queue up and get back behind him as soon as you can again before he does the combo again. Additionally, once he gets low HP, around 30% health, he'll trigger an HP break state. This immediately causes him to take no damage for a short period of time and launch a devastating combo to your tank. As long as your tank has high magic defense and M-block, they should safely be able to tank this. If you are using a melee DPS, you certainly do not want to be in range with that without Orb of Contract. After wave 20, the power of enemies will start to scale heavily, so usually only more invested heroes will be able to continue. If you're strong enough, you'll meet Dullahan at wave 25. Like Cataplops, his attacks are primarily frontal base, but he deals strictly physical damage this time. If your tank or DPS can get behind him, he is much safer to fight. Watch out for his Raging Skull attack, as it deals multiple hits and inflicts a damage over time. You can cleanse this dot. Here's a demonstration of taking advantage of Dullahan's weaknesses. As soon as the fight starts, I dive behind him. Now that his direction's redirected, any of his attacks will hit the tank and anything behind them, but since behind them isn't directed towards my priest, they are fully safe to support. Now he does have several knockbacks, so do take mind of that. If he knocks your tank back several times and he's facing your priest still, he will eventually be able to reach your priest and start cleaving them as well. Child of Hellfire is faced on wave 10, but is fairly easy to beat at that point. However, you will have to face her again on wave 30. At this point, she will be quite the challenging foe. At this point, teams that are not well invested will find it difficult to clear this fight. Child of Hellfire has several nasty moves, such as summoning ads who will pelt your team, summoning a giant fireball to damage the whole party, and lastly, her deadly front aerial kick, which allows her to dive to the highest attack party member, dispel them of all buffs, and deal significant damage. This attack has a high probability of one-shotting your DPS if they do not have high magic defense. With the ethers you obtain, it is recommended to use them to enhance your MVP team's soul weapons in order to continue to progress further into Eclipse. Once you get your weapons enhanced to 15, you'll begin to have excess blue and purple ethers. At that point, you can start applying those to your weaker teams to get them further to increase your red and gold ether yields. This concludes the introductory guide to Eclipse. The tips here should help you prepare teams for the early parts of Eclipse and clearing up to wave 40. Beyond wave 40, strategies are still developing. I will produce an advanced Eclipse guide once we have the new strategies optimized.